Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking this time out with us. And I just want to go ahead and jump right into it. One of the biggest crises that we're facing here in the state is affordable housing. And how do you feel as though Bernie Sanders will be able to help remedy this crisis?
Well, part of it's twofold. It's the housing crisis, so the senator is fully aware about gentrification and how native-born people in any area, so whether it's here, York, Chicago, Seattle, are really being priced out of being able to live. So his Housing for All program, which is, one part of that is to make sure we control rents in the same way that mortgage. If you're buying a house, you know what your interest rate is going to be on any given year or few years. When you are renter, that's not the case. So one part is on the housing side. African American community in particular lost about 40% of its wealth in the Great Recession of 2008. There's something horrible about that, and we got to rectify that. The other side of that is making sure that people have jobs where they can earn money so that they can then live a good life. So part of that is with his, making sure that unions are strong, we bring unions back in this country, and the other part of that is making sure that we increase the minimum wage to a better wage in this country so the working people of this country can live a better life.
And a tertiary would be trades. And the ability to offer free trade school, you're building a workforce that now becomes onerous. I grew up in a neighborhood called Acaria Heights in the west side of Atlanta. And that neighborhood at one point was 80 to 85% ownership, if not more. And it's now at about 45 to 60% renters. If you're renting a property, you're not going to care for that property in the same way. If you had an opportunity to rent to own a home or to be a purchaser in that community, which has never really fallen into blight, gets a chance to build upon the shoulders it was built on, and that was the post-World War II generation. So a big part of me is solving the housing solution is solving the job solution in terms of trade skills that are going to be needed to rebuild the infrastructure of this country over the next 20 years. It's not just going to be roads and bridges, they're going to be homes built, and the men and women that are taking those trade school skills and bringing them back to the communities are going to be the people that are able to re-enter their community versus their community gentrifying.
That's right. So what is it from Bernie Sanders' record of history that makes you feel as though he's best qualified to get that done? What has he done in the past, or what has he pushed through that says this is somebody that I definitely want to get behind?
For me personally, he's an extension of what Eugene Debs and Lucy Parsons were doing in the late 1800s and early 1900s. He's an extension of what Martin Luther King was doing with the Poor People's Program. He's an extension of what my personal mentor, who worked directly under King, Reverend James Orange, did in terms of helping unions organize and helping people have things like rent control. To me, he is a part of a greater revolution in this country that has always fought against unbridled capitalism in matters of the people and the proletariat. So for me, if you look at his 40-year track record, 50 years if you go back to him being a young man campaigning with the Civil Rights Organization and forward, he has been consistent with the same message. He has been consistent with the same programs and the same dogma, and there's not very many people do it. Most politicians, if you check their record 8 years back, you'll find a radically different person than the person that's in front of you. Very few politicians can you find 40 years back that are the exact same person with subtle nuances that have been changed at the will of the people versus the thoughts of corporations.
Amen. I mean, there's scripture in the Christian tradition that says that you will know the tree by the fruit that it bears. And hashtag roll the tape at any time, any given moment. Senator Bernie Sanders has been a consistent champion for justice, what is right, what is just, and what is good. And that is really what we need in this moment in time, especially in an environment where so many politicians, there have been numerous freedom fighters over the ages, especially in the African American tradition. But when somebody has taken an oath of office and they run for office as a vocation, it's hard to find somebody who doesn't sell out for money or sell out for prestige. I mean, it reminds me of something that Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm once said, and I'm paraphrasing her, but she said when it's money versus morality, money always wins.
Right.
When you think about the champion that is Senator Bernie Sanders, he has always, as Michael has said, been on the right side. He's been on the justice side. No matter what the polls say, no matter what the elites have to say about it, no matter people gunning for his position, he's always going to be right there. And the black community in particular,
right.
A community where we never benefit when the status quo is what's up.
Yeah.
We always lose on the status quo side. Status quo say keep us enslaved,
Right.
So we need somebody like him that's a champion that will go against the status quo and put his principles into his policies, and somebody who has absolutely nothing to lose. And Senator Sanders has nothing to lose at this
Right.
point.
I mean, it can be pretty much well documented. I've seen some of the videos when he's going against Senate.
Yeah, same haircut, just hair is a little blacker.
Right.
But he
right.
said the
Right.
exact same
Yeah.
things, absolutely.
Roll the tape, hashtag roll
Yeah.
the tape.
And for people to take that seriously, when the senator says status quo was once slavery was legal, that's a fact.
Right.
When he talks about prison reform, essentially you're talking about reforming the 13th Amendment, which allows for slavery. The loophole is you have to be a prisoner. We know that we have essentially made it easier for people who look like me and you
Right.
to get elected to the job of being a prisoner. So anyone who fights against that fights definitely against the status quo, just like he fought against Jim Crow, just like his heroes fought against chattel slavery.
Right. So, to people who have some level of skepticism, right? Because one of the knocks that many politicians get, and Bernie Sanders, unfortunately, is not exempt from it, is that we hear this rhetoric primarily during campaign times. I'm pretty sure you're aware of it. But then once the campaign trail is done and the chapter is closed and a new page is written, at that point, is there anything that is on record, or he's actually gotten something done for the very people he claims that he's going to represent, African American or otherwise, outside of just the fact of being the lone wolf in the Senate advocating? Has he been able to successfully get anybody to work with him to get those endeavors?
His co-chair has worked in Ohio with Republicans and Democrats. She's experienced on both sides of the aisle. She's done a terrific job of that. But oftentimes people say, well, what has he gotten done, as though they somehow follow politics on a local level.
Right.
I challenge many of the same people to name me who their state representative is, their local city councilman, their wardsman, or anyone that deals with their everyday life. And if you can't do that, you're only being fed that question asked by whatever publication you're watching or whatever television show. But to answer you, who are the people that push the socio-political, economic conversation forward? Dr. King never held public office.
Right.
Dr. King is the reason we sit here as a free people today. Be you black or white, you're in a free America post the Civil Rights Bill of 1960, 65, 66, right? Dr. King never held office. This man has held office, and he did not get the presidency in 2016. But what happened? In 2015, you never would have thought decriminalization of marijuana nationally was possible. We sit here some 3-4 years later, not only would it be impossible, but now people who look like me and you demanding to be in the business, and the business having to let them in. Simply because he dared to run. On a very local level in Atlanta, a Bernie Crack named Vincent Fort ran for mayor of Atlanta. Atlanta's a black city. It's championed itself as a progressive city for over 50 years. It was not progressive in its drug war policy. And in fact, it was degressive, because people who looked like the politicians' children were the people going to jail. If Bernie Sanders had not run a national campaign saying that if elected, I will take it off the Schedule 1 list, then that Bernie Crack would have never stood a chance in the mayoral election, and you never would have gotten marijuana decriminalized in a city like Atlanta, and you would have gotten young men who went to Clark, Morehouse, Morris Brown, picking up petty crimes, and instead of being students, becoming criminals. So he's progressed legislation without having to be in the legislation in Georgia. When you talk about Amazon, would they ever have given you $15 an hour had he not made that a national thing? Would Walmart now be considering that if he had not? So when talking about who passed legislation and who didn't, the legislation that is passed usually affects us worse than first. But the person that has pushed the needle socially to push us on a local level to get legislation passed has always been Bernard Sanders in the last 4 or 5 years. And I dare anybody to argue that with me.
That's right.
So much to the point the Democrats went and found 8 prototypes and put them run against him.
That's it.
Well, he was a prototype. They found 8 imitators, you know.
Right.
I did want to touch on one question that to bring up a point that you made, because it's kind of related to the affordable housing reform, right? Is that how can Bernie Sanders ensure that if he is successful with pushing it, that on the state level, the local level, that the money is actually being allocated to the places that they're supposed to impact the people that they're supposed to?
I would argue that's a us question.
Okay.
And again, when people ask me when he dropped out of the race last time, well, not when he dropped, when he was taken from, like Stacey Abrams. He got Stacey Abrams by the DNC. What do you want to do now, Michael? I'm going to go home and I'm going to support every Bernie Crat I can. I supported Vincent Ford. I'm supporting Mayor Ted on this go-round. I'm supporting every state legislator that aligns himself with that. So we have a task after we get him to become president. The task isn't we got a president, we clap for him, we got a quirky guy, everything's going to be right. It's to now, from the ground up, take that fever, take it to the ground, take it to the state legislators, take it to the local, and push that up. Right now in Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms, our mayor, has signed, I think we needed 15 to 25% of affordable housing around the Beltline. She's making sure those numbers get up. She's partnering with she's partnering with people of color and black people, developers and other developers on that. That, it could not have happened. But I would say big part of the reason that's happened is because of Sanders' campaign and the pressure. So as for me, I would say that I don't give all the power to any personality, but take his policy back to your state. Take his policy back to your municipality. Organize the same way we're organizing him nationally. Do that locally and drive that legislation from the ground up. And once it hits his desk, it will be signed.
That's right. I mean, this is a not me, us proposition, and that's why the senator runs on that. This is not just some catchy saying. He means that. And it definitely takes teamwork to make the dream work. And as somebody who served on both the local and state levels of government, it is vitally important that we elect people all across the spectrum, from local to regional to state to national, who have the same mindset
Absolutely.
as Senator
Absolutely.
Sanders, so that way we can get this progressive agenda pushed deeper.
Absolutely.
It's not going to happen with one president, and
Right.
the senator totally understands that. And then the Democratic Party itself, we would not be talking about, all of the issues that Michael just laid out. Let's add healthcare, Medicare for all. We wouldn't be talking about those issues had he not dreamed and dared a bigger dream. Because what did the neoliberals tell him? You reaching too high, you dreaming too big. Folks want ponies. Yeah, people do want some damn ponies.
Right.
We want some ponies. If healthcare is a pony, I want it. If sending my students, my baby to college, having them debt free, I want it, or tuition free, I want it. To have a president who says to the black community, historically black colleges and universities mean something in the United States of America, and whether they're private or public, I'm going to treat them special in that I'm going to make sure that every student that goes to those institutions come out debt free. Black colleges and universities only make up about 3% of all of the colleges and universities in the United States of America. I think there's about 101 of them. But they graduate over 20% of the undergraduate degrees that black people get. That's real. And so to have the senator committed to that means something to us. The fact that we die at higher rates. Black women dying at higher rates. Black babies die at higher rates. When your baby grows up, you still got to worry about them dying at a higher rate. And you have somebody saying we will have a country where health care will be a human right. Canceling student debt. Black women hold most of the student debt in this country. To cancel that debt, because all of the things that we're talking about are intertwined. When you talked about housing and how can people afford housing, well, it's about the job, but also as a middle class person, if I can get my student debt relieved,
Absolutely.
that opens up so much more disposable income that then I can put elsewhere.
Absolutely.
So all of these things really go together, and there is only one candidate who's not playing with this, who has said to the system, I'm coming for you. And the universal nature of these programs, whether it be canceling student debt, college for all, and within that is trade schools, as Michael laid out, Medicare for all, those programs need to be universal, because if they're not universal, if they're just for us, they ain't gonna happen.
Yeah.
But if they're universal, then everybody got skin in it.
One of the things that's kind of a touchy thing here in the States, that we have several HBCUs, and our HBCUs are failing economically. They get a very little bit of support from the loans, and some of it's because they pay for the education, they go into debt for the education, but the job markets that are available for them are not the same as people who are said, tracked to go into like a tech career, so to speak. So when you talk about trade schools, I think that that's a very good thing that we need. But I guess to make the question here is that we have a lot of people who are foreign to the U.S. who take advantage of their visas to get jobs that would pay a certain median income to where we could actually afford the housing, but we're not tracked or put into those positions that could actually earn that kind of income. Is there any kind of policy or position that Bernie Sanders would have that would kind of say more minorities, more Americans need to go into these tech-related fields, per se?
I'd like to make note that Spelman College graduates as many black women that go into tech as Georgia Tech. Take a minute to consider. I'd like to also say that things like agriculture are taught at FAMU. Agriculture and engineering are taught at Tuskegee University. It'd be easy enough to take a HBCU that's rebounding like Morris Brown, and as a community first, the responsibilities with us as individuals in the community, as a black community, supporting Morris Brown coming back, and supporting it coming back not just as a liberal arts college, but as a college that specifically focused on things like tech, music engineering, hospitality, production, the same stuff you guys are doing here today. So as a community, we need to identify these things, and then we need to have an agenda. I like Sanders. Sanders is a white Jewish man from New York. He's in Vermont. We may not be on his mind every day. Thank God we have an ambassador like Senator Turner in there talking to him. But we need to make our agenda known. We need to say we want to go into tech the next 20 years, and this is what we think. And I'm guaranteeing you, if we take that to him and if we put that on his desk, I'm not saying he doesn't have anything already. I'm just saying as a constituency, as a voting group, it is time to stop asking what do you have for us and say this is what we want. What version of this can you give us?
That's right. What we need.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you taking your time out for this.
Absolutely,
really
I appreciate
it.
you.
Thank you. We
Yes, sir.
appreciate you.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Great.